The first show. I just want to first say thank you for joining me. Thank you for supporting me. It means so much to me that you guys are here. Now, I just want to start off by saying why I created this show. I started the show because I wanted to bring awareness to other people about topics that people probably don't think other people go through, if that makes sense. Um, we're kind of all the same in a way or another. And I just felt like that I wanted people to know that there is hope and you can make it out of the hardest situation. Now, it kind of reminds me when I was younger, there was this radio station that played the same song over. It was like ridiculous. And I remember, the whole saying, "Oh, we're on a boat right now," and I'm like, "On a boat?" And now, as an adult, I realized that they were changing format, and that's what I'm doing. I'm changing my format, and I'm so glad that you guys are gonna accompany me in this adventure, in this journey on changing my format. Thank you. Now let's get down to the nitty gritty. My first show is about domestic violence. I've been in 3 abusive relationships. Ooh, I know. You think I learned the first time. Uh, I want to say the first one was the hardest because, that's where it all began. And I went through a lot with the first one. It was more mental, uh, less physical, definitely more verbal. If words could cut, they were cutting. And things really did get bad. And, in that first abusive relationship, he broke me down until I basically, you know, basically just listened to him. Didn't, couldn't get my own mind and think for myself. I just couldn't do it because he had broken me down so low that I felt like I needed him. And it was, very hard to get over. Like I said, I have been in 3 of them, right? So it was very hard to get over. But I did. As you can see, I'm right here. Okay, sorry. Um, but that is why I am gonna have this next guest that's about to come on. She is close and dear to my heart. We've been friends for a long time. She was a companion of my abuser's brother, which she also got abused by my abuser's brother. And we were together a short time between meeting. And she means a lot to me. Her name is Soul, and she brings so much sun to my life, and I love her. So, no further ado, let's invite Soul. Come on, Soul. Oh, thank you for coming.
Hi guys, how are you? Thank you
Thank
for
you so
having me.
much. I appreciate it so much. Okay, so yeah, I was telling the audience how we met and everything, and through the abuse and everything, right? Do you want to say anything about yourself? You want to talk a little bit about what you remember?
About the abuse.
Yes.
Um, I remember it was about 3 months into us being together that he first hit me. He kicked me in the back of the head. Um, and I knew I should have left, but instead I just stood. I got sorries and pleas afterwards, and I don't know what happened, and my anger, and I stood. And it just escalated from there little by little. It was more verbal abuse, mental abuse, a lot of mind games, a lot of spitting in the face, just disrespectful events. It took me out of my character, where I went from not allowing allowing myself to be treated this way to not allowing it, and just instead of leaving, entertaining it.
Mhm.
And tick for tat, and I need to do something worse, and oh, you
Mhm.
did this, so I'm gonna do that.
Mhm.
There were times where I tried, to be an adult about the situation and walk away, and I'll get stalked.
Right.
Or I was on a date once, and out of nowhere, he came and just grabbed my titty, just grabbed my
Wow.
whole breast. And
Wow.
my date looked, and I looked, and I realized, oh shit, I guess I can't move on because he's still around somehow, some
Right.
way. I
Right.
remember getting up from that table, telling my date I'm sorry, and leaving. So going downstairs, and this guy is on a hand and knee with a wedding ring. Will
Mm.
you marry me?
Right.
Um, it was. I knew it wasn't love, but I stood around. I don't know why. It took me about 2 years to actually get away from him.
Mhm.
Um, and this was after breaking up. It took
Yes.
2 years to actually get away from him, to actually be able to go on dates and feel comfortable. Um, from
But
time to
that just shows how, controlled we were, like we felt like we couldn't go anywhere. You know what I mean? It was like it was that or nothing. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
very depressing to believing that you have no control of your own life, that someone else has control on someone else has control on how you feel.
Hmm.
Your day can start regular, and then all of a sudden, just one attitude or one mistake that you made that's not a mistake.
Yeah.
um, it took a while. It took a while to get to myself and be myself again, because
Yes.
it took a lot of abuse. It took a lot of strain from my life.
Yes.
It drained
Yes.
me. It drained
Yes.
everything. I had no hope. I felt like a failure. Like, this is what it is. I felt like damaged goods. I got his name tattooed on me, and I never heard the end of it.
Yeah.
Um,
I hear
nobody
you
will
on
ever nobody will ever want you.
that.
It was a lot. And years later, I spoke to said abuser,
Hmm.
and I got sorry for the shit I put you through. So everything I went through summed up to four letters: shit. Um,
But
it
did
it
you believe him? Did you believe him when, he was like, I'm sorry, and all that? Did you believe him?
For all years later,
Hmm.
when I got the sorry, hell no. Um, but at this point, years later, after talking to him, I was stronger. I no longer, nothing he said could affect me. It was actually funny speaking to him. It was actually, and even speaking to him, I realized it's still all about him. Um,
Hmm. Most of
but
the time it is with abusers.
exactly. So, I'm just happy it's not me. Whoever, and he should get you know, he should actually get the proper diagnosis and
Right.
proper help for what he has, whatever it is. I don't know, but I'm just happy it's not me. It's sad to say, because there's probably someone else out there going through it. 'Cause
Yes.
they change. I don't think it's something that they change. I think they just find weaker women.
I,
And
I agree with
noticed
you.
I've
I,
noticed that a lot of abusers, they tend to go for the young ones.
mhm.
The
They're
young ones,
easy to manipulate.
yes,
Easy
very
to
multiple.
manipulate. So let's talk about how, we went, what we went through together. You know what I mean? Let's
Huh.
talk about that, like how, how we met, because I remember we've seen each other, but we never really spoke to each other. We wasn't even allowed to
It was.
speak to each other. You know what
I
I mean?
I know I was in your house, but I barely saw you. You were locked in the room a lot.
And that's
We were.
crazy. Like I don't, remember these things, these traumatic experiences. I
I
don't.
was actually in your house was the first time I was hit. Uh,
Wow.
that was the first time that ever happened, and as soon as it happened, um, I know there was another female in the house, you, but I knew that we weren't able to talk, and I knew I couldn't go knock on the door and be like, "Hey, this happened,"
Right.
because you yourself were in your own shit,
Right.
So,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
that's why the day that we were actually able to communicate and talk, that
Right.
they
And it
let.
was so awkward, right? It was like, oh my God, are we allowed to even like they let us do it and we were like, are we even supposed to talk?
I mean,
You
I
know
know
what I
that
mean?
we opened the bag of worms. It's like, wait, listen, we only got but so much time.
Right, right. This is
This
what's
is
happening
happening.
to me. Yeah.
And I remember you telling me, go, you have to go. You know, I remember you saying, you felt stuck because you had a child, but I didn't have children, so I can just go, get away. And as easy as that sounds with not having a child,
Right.
it was so hard. It
Yeah.
was so hard because I wasn't left alone. I could, like everywhere I turned, it was him. He was
Yeah.
there somehow, some way. Um, we've been through a lot together.
Yeah, we have. We
Years,
have, and we're still close, okay?
many years of abuse.
Many years. Right.
I don't know. I can't say I should have. I could say I should have been stronger, but I was also young and didn't know what, what love was.
Yeah.
So that's
Who
that,
knew?
that was
Who
it.
knew? Yeah.
You know.
So, but how are you doing now? Like, how do you, from then to now, you know, how do you feel as much has changed, with yourself?
I mean, I feel like I made the right decision leaving. I'm better off, just overall. It has, just there's no explanation of the feeling you have when you're away from that negativity, that drowning feeling, that
Amen.
you still want to help the person, but you don't know how to, and everything is negative and toxic. So now it's way better. Like you don't feel like that. So I feel
I'm
good.
so happy for you. I am so happy for you. So, and I love you so much, and I'm glad that our lives, intertwined with each other because, there was a reason for it. And I appreciate you. And thank you so much for coming on my show and telling your story. I love you. Okay.
You
Thank,
enjoy audience.
thank you. I love you. Bye, honey. Bye. Thank you so, so much, Mama. I really appreciate you joining with me. As you guys can see, me and So have been through a lot. And even though we have definitely came up from it. And with that said, I want to bring some hope. And my next guest is a known doctor in psychology, and she's also an expert in relationships. She also has a book called But He Says He Loves Me. Please help me welcome Dr. Dina McMillan. Thank you so much, Dina, for joining me, Dr. Dina McMillan. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I appreciate you coming. Do you want to tell us about your book?
Well, my first book that people can actually purchase is called But He Says He Loves Me, and it's going to come up backwards. I don't know why I do that. I don't know if I need to put a mirror up here,
No, I
but
see it clear. I see it.
okay. It's called But He Says He Loves Me, and the good thing is the book is not only, look how short it is. I wrote this book because I have been working, at the time I wrote it, I'd been working in domestic violence for almost a decade. And I kept hearing the same stories over and over and over again, and with no resolution. And it didn't matter where the victim came from, it didn't matter where the abuser came from, because I was interviewing them too.
Mhm.
They were telling me all sorts of stuff that they then stand in court. I had to be really good about not sharing anything they told me. It was confidential until death, and they knew that. So they were really open and frank with me, and then they'd stand in court and say the exact opposite.
Hmm.
Or if the victim was there, they'd say something that they told me wasn't even true because they knew it would work on her. So I had two reasons. First of all, I recognized that abusers only use a discrete number of tactics, no matter where they're from, no matter what race, creed, color, religion, age, small number of tactics. But these tactics are powerful, and nobody was teaching women what they looked like. So women are just like bunnies going out into a field full of wolves, just completely unprepared. But also, women have no idea what these men really think, how they really think. And so if you, when you read the book, Elsie, you said you read the book.
Yes, I did.
I decided to do it with two voices. On the left-hand page throughout the book, I made a combination of all the men I talked to because, of course, I can't reveal anything that would identify a specific individual. I made the left-hand page in the voice of a man as he says, hey, this is how you train your woman. And I used the kind of language they use, like training and learning and authority. They don't see it as control and abuse and
Right.
whatever. They use that nice language for themselves. And then on the right-hand page, it's me telling the reader, this is what it looks like when he's using these tactics. And I actually describe them in the book.
Yes, yes, yes. And it was really good and very much informative. And I'm glad that I got to read it. And I hope my viewers do go out there and buy it because it's definitely very good. A question that I have, why do you think that these women are attracted to, men in control?
Well, because we're taught that controlling men are masculine. And also, I think what it is women aren't being taught until my program came along, and my program has been out there for a decade now. But until my program came along, nobody was teaching women the difference between somebody who is masculine and someone who is an abusive controller, who
Right.
wants to not just have a relationship, he wants ownership like you're a slave. And once you know the difference, once I teach you the difference, it's really easy to see the difference. I call it a superpower.
Mhm.
You can actually see the difference, and you can see the difference early. One of my goals is to teach women so they recognize this first, second, third time you go out with a guy. So you don't end up involved with an abuser. That's also why I started my podcast. Now, my podcast series is called Unmasking the Abuser, and it's available on all of the podcast platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, and I walk you through the process because I want every woman, every teenage girl to have this superpower to
Yes.
be able to spot these abusers early so they don't end up involved with them.
Yes, I hope that, people really, are listening and paying attention because, domestic violence is no joke. And just like you said, it's everywhere, it's happening to everybody basically. So another question, how do you think that it affects kids in, being, seeing this in, seeing the abuse?
Well, even if they only see the power dynamic difference between the abusive parent and their other parent and the victim parent, that in itself is so incredibly traumatizing and unhealthy. And unfortunately, as much as we'd like to think otherwise, our first go to when we're having relationships ourselves is to replicate the relationships we grew up with,
Hmm.
whether they were healthy or not, whether we hated them or not. So having kids grow up around this is terrible for them. And it's also one thing I should mention. People keep asking, why does this seem to run in families, one generation to the next? And one of the reasons is when you have an abusive partner, these guys will actively interfere with your ability to properly nurture your children because the abuser expects his victim, his partner, to be on call to meet his needs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So he will actively force her, coerce her, encourage her to neglect her children in favor of him. I had a woman who had a 6-month-old son, and she came to get a restraining order, and he was still being breastfed. And she said when he would cry at night, her husband, who was the abuser, would not let her go to the baby.
Oh,
Said that this little 6-month-old boy needed, and I quote, to man up.
wow.
Daddy's time now. So this
Wow.
little boy was going to grow up feeling abandoned. He's going to grow up feeling neglected, all because his mother was with an abuser. Now, she left him, but if she's like many women, she'll go back and forth 5 to 8 times before she leaves him permanently, and
And
she may have left
I'm
him.
sorry. And why do you think that is? Why do you think, women continue to go back knowing, what the outcome is?
Well, because they don't know. One of the things, first of all, the psychological processes, one of the things I do when I do seminars and workshops is I show whether they're professionals or judicial officers or law enforcement or just members of the public, I show how powerful the processes is, the influence mechanisms used by abusers are. So they really get inside your head. And one of the things they do is they grab onto your dreams and they really build your dreams up about the ideal life, the ideal relationship. They make sure that they're front and center in that. And every time the woman leaves, they try to draw her back by saying that dream that you had is still possible if you come back. So many times the women are so in love, not necessarily with him, but with that dream life that he's promised them. And to make it easier for them to make the decision, he has also threatened what a horrible life they will have without him.
Mm-hmm.
The contrast is really clear. He's promising you this ideal life and this wonderful life, or he's saying you're going to be so in such bad shape, your kids are going to hate you because they'll know it's your fault that they've been plunged into poverty. But if you just stayed with dad, everything would have been great. So it's the manipulation of the mind that the abusers do that gets women to go back. It's certainly not because they're stupid. It's not because
No, of
they want
course not.
to be abused or any of those reasons that outsiders sometimes point the finger at the victim and say it must be okay with her because she keeps going back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Another thing, I read in your book that you wrote, abusers cannot take control over you. You must give it to them. Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is during the earliest phases of the relationship, they do the first step, first tactic, testing and training. From the earliest days, they start pushing against your boundaries to see if they can get away with things. Like getting you to reveal information where it's really intimate. You're thinking, I don't know this guy that well. Getting you to commit to doing something in 3 months, and you're like, I don't really know this guy enough to do this. Whatever the boundary happens to be, having intimate relationships with him before you're ready. It can be, or it can be as simple as continuing to change the time you're supposed to meet and seeing if he can get you to just go along. Once they gain that control, if you allow someone to make decisions for you like that, even if you're doing it just to be polite, the way your brain processes that is that this person is a legitimate authority over you. So pretty soon he's going to be able to give you orders, make demands, and you'll just give in because your brain has adapted. So
Okay.
that's another thing that I teach people. You have to have firm boundaries. If he wants to keep calling you, another thing they'll do, they'll call you and they want you, once you're with them, they'll try to talk you out of going home. They'll contact you and talk late into the night. They'll do all of these things that you have to say yes or no. If you say no and push back, then that gives you the distance you need to see who is this guy that I'm thinking of getting involved with. If you say yes, there's always going to be another demand and it's going to come quick.
Get worse, right?
Very quickly.
What are some, like, I guess, like, some techniques, you can tell people who are in abusive relationships, like, I guess, how to get out of it, safely, if,
Well,
you know,
don't try to do it by yourself is one of the things I would say. sometimes you have to be quite clever in getting information. You have to know your abuser. Is he someone who checks on every little aspect of your life? Or one of the places that I've seen most often where women have some little degree of privacy is with their feminine hygiene products. So sometimes, although he will often have an opinion whether you use tampons or pads, sometimes he won't actually go into those things.
Right.
So it can be a very effective hiding place for any information that you need, or for taking your ID and putting it there,
Mm-hmm.
for the names and numbers of emergency contacts, so that if something happens, you grab that bag of tampons or pads and off you go. But please, please do it safely, because this is why I worry. I'm going to say something. I worry when we have social movements talking about defunding the police.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a Black American woman, I can tell you, along with Native American women, Black women are the most likely to be seriously abused in a domestic violence situation, and Black women have the highest rate of being murdered.
Mm-hmm.
So if the guy that you're leaving is dangerous, you absolutely are going to need backup. And usually that backup is law enforcement, it's domestic violence services. Try to find some help. But I should also say this, with my Unmasking the Abuser podcast series, I suggest people get a support group. So for women who either know someone who's been abused, like their mom or sister, or they've been abused before and they don't want it to happen again, get into a little group with several other women who read my book, who listen to the podcast, who are really clear on the early warning signs of an abuser, and make sure that all of you share information with each other as soon as you start getting involved with someone. Because often, if we're attracted to someone, we will not see warning signs, even if they're really glaring.
Mm-hmm.
You have to guarantee in the support group that you have to be completely open with each other and listen to each other if they say, well, maybe you should pull back a little bit, not see him quite so often, because it looks like he's moving really fast, which is what
Mm-hmm.
abusers do.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as staying safe while you're with him, you have to be very careful, because these guys are very controlling. So if you all of a sudden start emotionally pulling away, you'll realize something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
When you make a decision to leave, you're going to have to do it unexpectedly and all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And
Um, oh, I'm sorry.
there's every city, every town has support services. Please get
Yes.
in touch with somebody.
Yes, I put it in my description, and when I post, when everything gets actually posted, there will be a toll-free number and a text number, so you guys can definitely, hit up those numbers. As I want to ask you a personal question, before we end and everything. I have a hard time with like memory from that time when I was getting abused. Do you, have an idea why that is that I don't, remember?
It's traumatic amnesia, yes.
Okay.
And also, interestingly enough, when you've been in an abusive relationship and you're in that state of hypervigilance where you never know what's going to set your abuser off, it puts your brain in a state called fear conditioning.
Hmm.
And it's then the cortisol that comes as a part of that fear stays active in your brain. The adrenaline's active, the cortisol is active, and unfortunately, it starts messing with your cognitive processes. So your memory starts to become faulty.
Hmm.
In fact, I've trained judicial officers and said, usually when someone has been in a situation, if they are a bad witness and can't remember details, it's because they're lying. When you're dealing with domestic violence, it's the opposite.
Hmm.
It's an indicator that she's got fear conditioning, that she's got traumatic conditioning from that time do not assess whether or not she's telling the truth on how well she remembers the details.
Mm.
You have to look at, there are tests that they can tell if you've been abused or not.
Mm.
Don't remember. You don't need to remember. That's one of the things with my book, with my program. You don't need to remember. The information I give you will keep you from getting involved with another one. And that's the important part.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much, Dr. McMillan, for joining
Oh,
me
you're
on my
welcome.
show. I hope everybody checks out her podcast, please. Thank you so much, Dr. McMillan. I really appreciate it. Have a
Oh,
great,
you're very welcome. And good
thank
luck.
you.
If you need me
Thank
again,
you.
let me know.
I will. I probably will. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Let me just,
Bye.
bye. Thank you so much, Dr. McMillan, for joining with me on my show. Now, guys, this is the end of my show, and I just want to leave you with a little positive note. Turn your wounds into wisdom. Till next time. Love you guys. Let's get real.